We are live, calixboxing.com, calixboxing 2.0 here on YouTube. Um, doing great with the archives. So continue, please, to check out those archives. Let me get the comment section up in case in case people come in on the live. And if you are, as always, leave a comment as you're coming in live and hit that like button. Hit the sub as always. And we're moving along with the subscribers on YouTube and also with the followers on Twitter. Appreciate all the support I'm getting over on Twitter. Let's talk strap season. Let's talk belts. First, let's get into Jermell and Jermall Charlo, the dichotomy between the both of them before we talk about the straps. I got up on the website, calixboxing.com. I've got all of the real champions up on the website, from heavyweight down to minimum weight. You can all check them out there. No Reggie belts. No Reggie belts. We're only talking real champions. And on top of that, I broke down sort of like a Olympics medal list and standings up on the website of you have 44 belt holders in boxing today, legitimate champions, and you have 16 countries represented in those 17 weight classes. So I've got a breakdown of country by country, and I'll talk about that later on in the broadcast, how each country ranks as far as how many belts are held in boxing. Shout out John Morales, Jermell with Duckmel if he moved up. Yeah. Let's first talk Jermall. Let's talk Jermall Charlo off the bat. Jermall Charlo pulls out of the fight or postpones the fight with Selecki. He hasn't fought in 13 months. Hasn't been sharpening that his skill set, sharpening his tools, which may be a reason, if the injury is legit, why he's injured. Shout out OJ22 in the building as well. He was spotted in the club over the weekend or a couple days ago, drunk in the club, a week after the postponement of his fight with Selecki due to a back injury. Now, I'm not saying you can't party in the club, Jersey Shore style, Paulie D style. I don't know the other names of the Jersey Shore characters, or I would shout them out. I'm not saying you can't party in the club if you have an injury. That's not what I'm saying. I'm sure people go out to clubs when they're injured. Maybe they're feeling a little under the weather and they just get bored and they want to go out to a club. I'm not trying to rain on that parade. You want to go clubbing? You want to go clubbing. That's fine. I'm not worried about that. What I'm saying is it's not a good look PR-wise. PR-wise. It's not a good look if you're injured, you pull out of or postpone a fight due to back injury a week ago, and then the next week you're on camera with your buddies at the club, drunk, slurring your speech, standing there like this, kind of waving back and forth with a back injury. It opens up the discussion. Perception could be everything, right? And once again, not questioning the back injury. All I'm saying is this opens it up to question. Is the back injury legit? And maybe Jermall needs a better PR team to tell him, look, if you're going to go out to a club, just make sure nobody is taking pictures of you, or that's impossible, right? Like, somebody's going to take a picture of Jermall Charlo if he's out at a club. It's going to happen. But his buddies are taking selfies with him at the club. He's drunk a week after he postpones a fight due to a back injury. And once again, it's the Jermall versus Jermell thing, right? Like, Jermell is a beast. Jermell is doing everything right. We'll talk about Jermell here in a minute in the saga with Jermell versus Tim Tszyu and whether it'll happen or not due to sanctioning bodies, sanctioning organizations. But it's the dichotomy between the two of them. Jermell becomes undisputed by fighting everybody in his division, within his division, over a 4 to 5 year period. And then on the opposite end of that spectrum, Jermall is not fighting the top guys in his division. Not only that, he's not even fighting. He hasn't been active in 13 months. And then we have a postponement on top of 13-month inactivity. And then after the postponement, a week later, he's out at the club, hanging out, getting drunk, carrying on camera. on camera. It's like, dude, if you're going to go out and get drunk at a club the week after you postpone a fight, at least don't take selfies with your friends. Not a good look, man. Get some new PR, get things going. But at some point, the career has to take a turn for Jermell. It's got to take a turn. Fight somebody top in the at 160, move up to 168, start making splashes there and try to earn that Canelo fight. But something's got to give. He's got to get this career moving because, once again, a postponement and then a week later, your back's not looking so bad at the club. And once again, not saying you can't club and dance and hang out and get drunk at a club with a back injury. I'm sure it's been done. I'm sure people have gotten injuries and gone out and got drunk at clubs. Just saying, there's better things you could be doing on camera to at least make it believable that you have a back injury. And by the way, how bad is Boo Boo Andre's injury? Has anybody answered this question yet? I don't see journalists really pushing this issue. We're over a month and a half since that fight was canceled. So what's the status of Boo Boo Andre's shoulder injury? Was it bad? Is it not so bad? Is it going to be inactive for a while? Does it require surgery? Jermell Charlo's back injury, how bad is it? Is it going to require surgery? Is it going to be out for a year? Is it going to be out for a couple weeks? Is the fight being postponed or canceled? I don't see journalists really pushing the issue on how bad are these injuries, getting some transparency, putting some pressure on the promoters to answer these questions. But Boo Boo Andre, how's the injury? Jermell Charlo, how's the injury? Are the injuries bad? They got to give us some answers. We need transparency. We need to know what direction these careers are going in. And if not, if there's no transparency, it starts to create an environment where people are starting to ask questions. Are these injuries legit? The fact that we're even asking these questions shows you the track record of both fighters. Fighters who have been legit up to this point, we would not be asking these questions about. That's right, not a good look. Jermell is 32 with 32 fights with no top fights. Think about that. That's right. Let's see, Chicano Prophet in the building. I've been injured and pulled out of a fight going to the club, but I just smoked a hookah. I'm not trying to hurt more. Damn, his team ain't nothing. Mel has my respect. Maul, not so much. My fighter page, but yeah, this ain't a good look. Let's see, 160 is a joke. He's right. I like Andre. He wants payday, but he's trying to earn it like Jermell. What's up, Nordic Warrior in the building? God bless to you as well. Now let's get on to the more positive side of this. Jermell Charlo, the real Jermell Charlo. We love Jermell Charlo on this channel. This dude handles his business like a fighter's supposed to handle his business, fights top opposition. In his weight class, became undisputed. All the belts that matter at 154 belong in his trophy case, and more on that in a minute, as we're going to talk belts in the picture of the belts in boxing. But Jermell Charlo, 154, and by the way, hit that like button as y'all come in and make sure to subscribe if you're not subbed. Jermell Charlo, after he consolidated all the belts against Brian Castano, won the rematch. It was ordered on May 31st by, who was it? The WBO ordered that he has 20 days to agree to face Tim Tszyu, or he loses his belts. He loses his belt. So he had 20 days to decide. He decided. He said, I'm going to fight Tim Tszyu. Props to Jermell Charlo, sticking around at 154. I thought the move was going to be Jermell Charlo moving up from 154 to 160, 160 Charlo moving up from 160 to 168. But it looks like 154 Charlo is going to stay 154 Charlo, which I'm all for. There's young lions in that division and Jermell is the real lion. He's the OG lion. He's the alpha lion. But he's decided, I'm going to stick around in this division and face these young lions coming up, a la Tim Tszyu, maybe Sebastian Fundora in the future. Real young lions in his division that are around 3, 4, 5. After what he's already done in the division. Okay, that's number one. Number two, I think part of the reason he's deciding to stick around at 154 is he wants to see what develops at 147. We've got multiple divisions here that have become undisputed, get 3 undisputed champions, and we also have a couple guys close to becoming undisputed. You look at 118 and 122, close to being undisputed. They're both one fight away. If Akhmadaliyah beats Ronnie Rios. But he's saying 118, 122 in a way versus Stephen Fulton is setting up to be a big fight in the lower weight classes. I think he's seeing just waiting to see if that's going to develop at 154 as well. If Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. fight later this year at 147 for undisputed and there's no rematch clauses involved, and Terrence Crawford really wants to carry out what he's saying he wants to carry out or attempt to, and he becomes 147-pound champion, undisputed, he would then try to move up to 154 and become undisputed at 154 and then become the first guy to be undisputed in 3 different weight classes. 3 different weight classes. Power move. So I think Jermell is waiting around to see what develops there and is there a super fight on the horizon. If I stick around long enough at 154 and win the fights I need to win, will that fight come to me at 154, a super fight between, say, a Terrence Crawford or possibly Errol Spence Jr., between 2 undisputed champions? So I think that's part of the reason he's decided to stick around at 154. Bigger things for him could develop there than if he moved up to 160. So that's number 2. Number 3 is there may be a snafu in the Tim Tszyu fight because they agreed to a fight. Jermell Charlo said, you know what? I'm going to stick around WBO. I'm going to fight Tim Tszyu. You want me to fight him? I'm going to fight him. We agreed to terms. But the IBF champion, Bakram Murtazaliev, who is Russian, he fights out of Oxnard, California, but he's Russian. 20-0, 15 KOs. A good fighter, not in the top 10, but a good fighter. Has decided that he's saying, I've been the mandatory for the IBF for Jermell Charlo since 2019. You can't continue to pass on me. You can't continue to give me step-aside deals. I want my fight now. And apparently they had an already signed agreement with Jermell Charlo. Once Jermell Charlo beats Brian Castaño in the rematch, he has 10 days to agree to fight me. We already have a signature, or he has to give up his belt. So now they're saying, no. Tim Tszyu is not in line. WBO is wrong here. IBF comes in line first before the WBO. And I should be fighting Jermell Charlo next. So we're going to see how this develops because we'd all rather see Jermell Charlo versus Tim Tszyu before we see Jermell Charlo versus Murtazaliev. Obviously, it's a bigger fight. But how many times can you continue to pay Murtazaliev step-aside money? He's already fought on Charlo's undercard twice as agreements for the step-aside. And on top of that, he's also fought on the undercard of Tim Tszyu's fight before. I forgot which one. Maybe that was his last fight. I think that was in March. So he's been fighting on these guys' undercard, just sticking around, getting step-aside deals since 2019, getting paid to fight on the undercards. I'm sure getting some step-aside money on top of it. And he's saying, you know what? I'm done with this. I want the fight that I was promised. Or this is him using leverage once again. This could be Murtazaliev's team saying, let's try to get more step-aside money out of this. Let's try to get on the undercard of Charlo versus Tim Tszyu, try to get some step-aside money, try to get an agreement for after that fight, for the winner of that fight, and stay in line, stay in the front of the line. And at the same point, stay on the undercard. And maybe Jermell Charlo moves up to 160 and will be first in line to get one of those vacant belts, the IBF vacant belt if Jermell Charlo moves up. So a lot of things in play here, but this could be Bakram Martezaliev saying, you know what? I'm tired of being stepped aside. I'm 20-0, 15 KOs. I'm ready now. I want my fight now. I want the fight now. So it could be that as well. But ultimately, there's a snafu here on whether the Jermell Charlo versus Tim Tszyu fight is actually going to happen next. I'm hoping it does. I'm hoping the IBF and WBO can get together. All the parties involved, Charlo, Martezaliev, Tim Tszyu, can all get in one room, get their heads together and say, you know what? Let's get this Charlo versus Tszyu fight next and do what we got to do to make sure that happens. So let's get to the belts. CalixBoxing.com, I put all the real champions on the website, from heavyweight down to minimum weight. Trying to consolidate it, make it easier for people to follow. So if you have a casual fan friend, you can say, hey, go to this page and you can see who the real champions are in boxing. 4 weight classes, 4 real championships in each division, 17 divisions. Try to make the complex simple, right? On top of that, I've created some standings on the website as well, calixboxing.com, to where you can go to see standings of the countries. There are 44 belt holders, I believe. I think that's what I wrote down. 44 belt holders represented in boxing over 17 weight classes in 16 different countries represented. And I had the countries written down. USA has 20 championships within those 17 weight classes. Second place is UK with 10. Third, tied for bronze. Japan and Mexico are both tied with 8. All right, so that's the top 4 right there. 20 for USA, 10 for UK, 8 for Japan, 8 for Mexico. An interesting thing has happened, though, if you look at the champions. Between 160, 135, and 160, there are only 2 non-American champions in boxing right now. If you count the real champions, no Reggie belts, no Reggie champions. You count the real champions, only 2 champions between 135 and 160, not American. That's Gennady Golovkin at 160, who has 2 belts, and Josh Taylor at 140, who has 4 of the belts. All right, so they represent 6 championships within those weight classes, but only 2 non-American champions. So in between 135 and 160, like the middle area of boxing, Americans are pretty much dominating. But if you look at from 168 up, there are no American champions. Canelo at 168. 175 is mostly dominated by the Russians besides Joe Smith Jr. Actually, Joe Smith Jr. So he would be the one American champion above 168. Then at cruiserweight, and then you got heavyweight, who are dominated by non-American fighters as well. So interesting thing. And then the reason Japan has so many belt holders is they're dominant in the lower weight classes. Japan, Asia, and Latin America dominates the lower weight classes. So Japan is dominant underneath 118. I mean, dominant. So shout out to Japan there. But I only recognize the real champions. I want to do what Floyd is saying we should do. Floyd came out and gave an interview out in Japan with Dizin, D-I-Z-I-N, yesterday, saying there are too many belt holders in boxing. There are too many titles. There are too many champions. We need to consolidate this and make it easier for people to follow. It's a problem because the sanctioning bodies are doing it to collect more sanctioning fees and rob fighters. Agreed. Floyd and I agree completely on that. Here's where we divert. I'm just a dude here on YouTube. 5,000 subscribers. 10 to 12 people live right now. Have a couple people who watch this on archive. That is a blip on the radar compared to the reach that Floyd has in boxing. Floyd, one of the biggest stars in boxing. You can argue the biggest star of the 21st century in boxing. On top of that, the reach that he still has in boxing as not only a former fighter, a guy still doing exhibitions, but a promoter. So he has ability to affect change in boxing as a promoter, where he could start. So the reason I bring this up is I'm just a dude here on the internet. I can't change anything, but Floyd can. So Floyd is complaining. Floyd likes to do this thing where he complains about an issue, but over here, he's benefiting from the very issue he's complaining about over here. He did it back when he was leading this crusade against drug use in boxing. His crusade, right? When the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight was supposed to come up, he was leading this crusade against drug use in boxing, right? He wanted drug testing. He wanted clean boxing programs. But at the same time, he had multiple fighters in his gym at the same time, simultaneously getting popped for PEDs. And he had a pretty cozy relationship with USADA. Some would argue a little too close and cozy. So we have the same thing here with the belt situation. Floyd likes to argue that there's too many belts. There are too many champions who don't deserve to be champions. But his biggest fighter right now, Tank Davis, is benefiting from this same system that Floyd is over here arguing about. If Floyd really wanted to affect change in boxing, if Floyd really wanted to attack this problem, he would lead by example. And one way he could lead by example is saying, you know what? We lied about this. Tank is not a multi-division champion. Tank is not a champion currently at 135 because these belts I'm over here complaining about, my guy Tank Davis has. He has one of these belts at 135. He just defended it against Rolly Romero, who also had a trumped-up belt. On top of that, when he fought at 140 against Matteo Barrios, he was fighting for one of these belts that I'm over here complaining about. And we paid the sanctioning fee. And the reason we paid the sanctioning fee is so we could go on Showtime and promote our guy as a 3-division champion. So we can go on Showtime pay-per-view and promote our guy as a lightweight champion, as a guy defending his championship, as a 8-time champion or something like that, whatever he is at this point. So you can't, in one breath, complain about the sanctioning bodies handing you down sanctioning fees that you feel are oppressive, but at the same time, you're exchanging those sanctioning fees for promoting your guy as a multi-division champion and a reigning champion at lightweight when Devin Haney currently holds the only belts that matter at 135. They're promoting Tank Davis as a lightweight champion when Devin Haney is the undisputed champion. Let me repeat that. Devin Haney is the undisputed champion, which means it's not disputed. It's not disputable. You can't dispute it. He has all of the belts that matter at 135, the only belts that matter. He is the only champion. It's non-disputable, undisputed. But Tank Davis is a champion in the same weight class. How? How is that possible? The Reggie belts. The same Reggie belts that Floyd's railing against. His guy, his main fighter, is a repeat offender of this. He's a repeat Reggie belt offender. That's what I'm going to call Tank Davis, a repeat Reggie belt offender. He's a habitual line stepper is what he is. He's habitually stepping over the line when it comes to Reggie belts. That's what we got with Tank Davis. So what I'm saying is more people, I didn't see one person ask a follow-up question when Floyd was bringing these issues up. I would have loved to have seen somebody bring up Tank Davis and say, you know what? You're right. Everybody in this room agrees with you. We need to simplify boxing. We need to make the complex simple to understand. We need to simplify this. So how about we all agree to make one belt per organization in boxing. Because you can make an argument for the 4-belt system, right? The reason for the 4-belt system, all of these belts were made to represent a different part of the world. And it works for the most part, the 4-belt system, in that you get guys come up through the rankings, benefit from the mandatory system, who wouldn't have gotten shots otherwise. So that's good. What's also good is, as I stated, if you look at the 4 major belts in each weight class, 17, 68 belts, 68 real belts in boxing. 16 countries are represented there. So you're having different parts of the world represented from the 4-belt system, which, whereas if you had one system, if you had one belt, one sanctioning body, you may have a pro-American bias, you may have a pro-Asian bias with another, but it all ends up balancing itself out. And when the 4-belt system works together, we get unifications, we get undisputeds. It's good. It's beautiful. We get the fights. We use that blueprint. We get the fights that matter. When the rankings work, which is very rare, we get mandatories that matter, right? That's very rare. But the problem with this is people are starting to use these Reggie belts as de facto mandatories. They say, oh, Tank Davis has to get the Reggie belt, the WBO regular belt, because if he doesn't, he gives up his spot in line to fight for the WBO super belt or the world belt, whatever it is, if he gives up his regular belt. That's what the mandatory process is for. You have one belt up here that matters, and then you have the rankings, and the top guy, number 1 in the rankings, is the mandatory. That's how it was set up to be. But now we've got the top guy, and then we've got another top guy, and another top guy, and another top guy. We've got a regular, we've got a silver, we've got an interim, we've got a champion in recess, and then we go down to the rankings. No. That's what the rankings were set up for. So now we've got a system, which Floyd is railing against, and rightfully so, set up to where we can collect sanctioning fees from this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, before we get down to the rankings, instead of just from this guy. And Floyd's right in calling this out, but where Floyd is wrong is his actions don't align with his words. Once again, much like a decade plus ago when it came to the clean boxing system, drug use in boxing, his drug crusade. And that's where Floyd and I divert. Floyd has a mouthpiece. Floyd has a bully pulpit. He needs to use that and back it up with actions. He needs to say, you know what? I'm going to back this up. Tank, relinquish your belt. Relinquish your belt. Become the mandatory for Devin Haney. We're going to work outside of our own organization. We're going to go across the street, and we're going to fight as Devin Haney's mandatory. That's what we're going to do. We're going to work with Top Rank, and we're going to make the fight between Haney and Tank Davis, and we're going to legitimately make you the only champion at lightweight. If Floyd had confidence in his fighter, Devin Haney, and he really meant what he said by saying there are too many champions in boxing, too many belts, that would be a good start. That would be a good start. Maybe other people would follow. Maybe not, but maybe they would. And at that point, he wouldn't be hypocritical in the situation, because right now he's hypocritical. He's saying there are too many champions, too many sanctioning fees, but yet he's promoting Tank as a 3-division champion when Tank has only won a legitimate champion in 1 division. And the current championship that he has at 135 is a regular belt. That's not a real belt. And on top of that, the championship he won at 140 is not. There are undisputed champions at 135 and 140. Tank Davis is neither one of them. So he's not a champion at 135. He was not a champion at 140. And if Floyd wasn't a hypocrite, he would say so. And he would start to work in the right direction of righting that wrong. And if we had real journalists in boxing, we would have had these follow-up questions. And another question we would have had for Floyd is, how can you claim that there are too many champions in boxing Yet you claim to have beaten this many champions and former division champions in boxing. Because Floyd's big claim to fame, one of them is I beat 18 champions and former champions, or 20, whatever the number is. But most of those champions were Reggie Belt champions. They were not real champions. They were title holders. Just title holders, not real champions. Sucks for Selecki, that's right. Shout out Javier Avila. Jermell versus Jermall. What is the difference? The letter E, which means effort, unlike Jermall. I like that. I like that. I'd like to see a Lara fight. Salute the Don. Team Batman Boxing in the building. I really like that fight. Shout out Hawker Mustang in the building. Undisputed is a great achievement, but by no means does that mean you have cleaned out the division. Not the slightest. Haney and Canelo got a lot of work to do. They're just getting started. What it means when you're undisputed is every trophy that matters in that weight is in your trophy case. So it depends on how you look at cleaning out a division, because if you look at cleaning out the division as maybe you look at it, you'll always be cleaning. You'll constantly be in the cleaning process. You'll constantly be sweeping, mopping, etc. Because there's always going to be young lions coming up. You could claim that Jermell Charlo hasn't cleaned up his division because Tim Tszyu is there. Sebastian Fundora is there. But once he gets rid of Tim Tszyu and Sebastian Fundora, let's say he beats both those guys, there's going to be another guy coming up. There are constantly guys coming up, filling up vacuums. Look at 147. Let's say Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford fight each other at 147 for undisputed. Let's say Errol Spence beats Terrence Crawford. You could then say he's beaten everybody in the division that mattered up to that point. But then you could say, no, he hasn't cleaned out a division because Boots is there. Virgil's there. Stanionis is there. Conor Benn is there. So you'll never be able to effectively clean out your division if you're looking at it that way. How I look at cleaning out a division, no matter how you do it, no matter if you were an email belt champion and leverage that into a shot against a flawed champion who had the other three belts. Devin Haney just cleaned out his division. That's how I look at it. No matter if you did it that way, no matter if you did it by the Canelo way, over a 3-fight process, no matter if you did it the way Jermaine Taylor did it, only 4 years in, he fights Bernard Hopkins and beats Bernard Hopkins. No matter how you do it, you collect all those belts that matter. If you have all the belts that matter, you're lineal champion. He cleaned out the division. And then somebody else will be able to come in and clean out the division by fighting him. That's just how I look at it. Because if you look at it that way, man, you'll never clean out a division. Never. There'll always be another guy. There'll always be a young lion coming up. There'll always be another guy moving up from a lower weight class to come and try to take what's yours. So I guess I look at cleaning out the division different. Haney can't beat Tank. I don't know, man. How many belts would the Four Kings have had if they fought today? A lot. They'd hold a lot. Undisputed should mean you beat a different fighter for every belt. Haney never fought Tio, Loma, etc. He lucked into an overrated B-class fighter with all belts. But that's not what undisputed means, though. Undisputed doesn't mean, yeah, you have all the belts that matter, but I think this guy would beat you. Because nobody would ever be undisputed. Nobody. Undisputed means there's a championship in the weight class. Everybody in sports competes for a championship. Everybody. That's what we're here for. We want to win. So undisputed means there's a 4-belt era, 4 sanctioning bodies, 4 championships in the weight class. That means the 4 championships in my weight class, I won them all. I won them all. It's undisputed that all of the championship trophies are in my trophy case. Nobody can dispute that. That's what undisputed means. It doesn't mean, yes, I have the championships, but somebody else. Nobody would ever become undisputed because somebody would always argue that this guy would beat that guy. So undisputed champions shouldn't take on contenders after becoming undisputed. That's not what I said. They don't have to take every single guy out, but how about 2 more after unifying the division makes sense, in my opinion. I've said I would love to see guys become undisputed and defend their undisputed championships. I would love for that to become sustainable. The problem is in boxing, it's become unsustainable for the argument that Josh Taylor made. Josh Taylor brought up, I just paid 11% of my total purse to sanctioning fees. This is not sustainable. It's not sustainable to defend all these belts simultaneously over a period of time. It's not. I would love to see that fixed. I'd love to see that fixed. And I would love for it to be more sustainable for fighters to defend their undisputed championships. I would love to see a case in which a guy sticks around in a division he cleans out and defends against young lions, which Jermell Charlo is trying to do here. But what I'm saying is we're simply, our odds here are cleaning out a division is cleaning out a division. It's winning the championships in the division. Cleaning out the division does not mean I beat 1 through 10 in the division, because guys will always be coming up the rankings. So yes, Jermell Charlo, in his case, I'd love to see him fight Tim Tszyu and Sebastian Fundora. I'd love to see it. But after he beats Tim Tszyu and Sebastian Fundora, you know how boxing fans are. They're going to say there's going to be another guy coming up. And you're going to say he didn't fight that guy, so he didn't clean out his division yet. Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence. Let's say Terrence Crawford beats Errol Spence. You're going to say, yeah, he beat Errol Spence, but he didn't beat Boots Ennis. He didn't beat Virgil Ortiz. And let's say he beats those two guys. You're going to be saying, oh, he didn't beat Stanionis. He didn't beat Conor Benn. He didn't beat Butsayev. It's always going to be the case. That's why I'm saying, like, we look at cleaning out a division differently. To me, cleaning out a division means you won the championships in your division. That doesn't mean you shouldn't stick around and defend it. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that's cleaning out a division. Charlo is a coward. Shout out Boxing Historian 206. Tank Davis says he wants to stay with Floyd Mayweather and get easy money for the rest of his boxing career. I wouldn't doubt it. Talk about what's the point of being the number one contender if you never get a chance for a title. When was the last time a champ fought the number one contender? That's what I'm saying. Like, the Reggie belt's getting away. The Reggie belt's getting away of it. It clouds the process. We have to simplify this. And that's why I'm trying to simplify it on my website, calixboxing.com. I've given you the real champions in boxing with no Reggies, no Reggie belts. You have the list from heavyweight down to minimum weight. On top of that, I've showed you on there the country standings of how many belts per country in boxing. That way you can get a good look of different countries that are represented. You can go and look at the rankings and see that there are only 2 non-American champions between lightweight and middleweight. You can develop a picture and make the complex simple. But if you start to add the Reggie belts into the picture, there are now too many champions. And that's where I agree with Floyd. But once again, where we disagree is Floyd needs to back this up with actions. You can't rail against paying sanctioning fees when you're benefiting from the sanctioning fees by being able to promote your guy as a 3-division champion on Showtime pay-per-view. You're benefiting from promoting your guy as a lightweight champion when we already have an undisputed lightweight champion. You're on Showtime pay-per-view. Everybody is acting. Everybody is in on this. Everybody from anybody on Showtime. Who are the guys on Showtime right now? Even Al Bernstein. Love Al Bernstein, but he's acting like Tank Davis is a 135-pound champion, and he's not. He's not. There are graphics and everything promoting Tank Davis as a 3-division, current 3-division champion, current lightweight champion, former junior welterweight champion, 8-time champion. When he's not any of those things, he's not. He's not a current champion at 135, just so they can promote this guy as a lightweight champion, defending against another lightweight champion in Raleigh Romero, who also has a JV belt. And they keep these JV belts to stay in the front of the line to fight for real championships. No, that is what the mandatory process is for. And if Floyd was a real one, Floyd would say, we're going to relinquish this fake belt, this fake Reggie belt at 135. We'll go up the rankings. We'll go through the mandatory process the right way. We'll become Devin Haney's mandatory. Everybody would love to see that fight. We'll make it a super fight in America between two big American fighters. And we'll go about it that way and fight for the real championship and try to become the undisputed champion, and we'll work with Top Rank. But they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. And that's why I don't want to hear what Floyd has to say about this unless he's actually going to do something to correct this problem. And he's not. He's not. I agree with your logic. There will always be contenders to fight, even when being undisputed. But think about it. Haney was using that same logic when he wasn't champion, saying Tio had to fight him. Best way to clean is to stand ready for anyone trying to get the belts. Stay cleaning, and perhaps in the end, we can say he cleaned the division every time. And if everybody had that mindset, then we constantly have unifications and undisputeds, which would be good. Yeah, but there's only 2 American champs from 105 to 130. And that's what I said earlier. Like, if you look at the lower weight classes, particularly 118 in South, Japan, there's 8 Japanese champions right now, or 8 championships owned by Japanese fighters right now. The Asian fighters, because you got Philippines represented as well, Thailand, Asian and Latin America runs the lower weight classes. It's just, and that's why I put the, I'm trying to simplify this for people on the website. You get to get a good look at what parts of the world do well in what parts of the weight classes. Because in the middle, it's America. Towards the top, it's Europe. Towards the bottom, it's Asian and Latin America. So it's interesting to see how that picture is developed in boxing. And that's why I got my belts by country standings up on the website. You can't normally clean out a division when only one fight twice per year. Haney is the exception. He became undisputed, just beating one guy. Correct. At this point, Tank doesn't need a belt for people to watch him. Okay. And that's what I'm saying. Like, just say that, though. Just relinquish the belt. You don't need to promote. If he doesn't need the belt, don't promote him as a lightweight champion. Just don't promote him as a lightweight champion, because he's not the lightweight champion. That's all I'm saying. Like, we agree there. Tank doesn't need the belts to become a crossover star, to sell in LA, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, New York. He's sold in multiple different parts of the world, parts of America. He didn't need the belts to do that. Stop with the charade of promoting this guy as something he's not, because he's not a multi-division champion. He's not a 3-division champion. He was not a champion at 140. Josh Taylor is the only champion at 140, and he's not the champion at 135 because Devin Haney is the only champion at 135. Simple enough. Haney can't leave 135 without fighting Tank. People can mock Tank all they want. The public opinion has a fight 50-50 regardless of him holding Reggie belts, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. I'm fine. I would love that fight. Cleaning on division is when you beat your contemporaries, not a young guy that just got out the prospect stage. Bam and Franco are Americans, but the boxing world considers them Mexican. Yeah, and I consider them American, and I put that on my standings, and it becomes hazy when you talk about nationality versus residence, but I consider Bam Rodriguez an American fighter for sure, and his brother. Tank Davis should carry the WWE World title to the ring. It's been a good episode. I will be back with more today. A lot more videos. I got fresh videos up this morning, fresh videos up yesterday. So continue to follow the channel and subscribe and like, and hit me up at calixboxing.com in the comment section as well. But more videos will be up later today. On that note, man,